Good morning, you're very welcome back. Now, I have to warn, as ahead of this next interview, we would like to warn viewers that they may find some of the content distressing.
In 2019, mother of three, Valerie French, was murdered by her husband, James Kilroy. Her brother, David, joins us now to talk about his new book for Valerie. David, good morning. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much. And we know that this isn't easy because you are talking about your lovely sister who was horrifically murdered, as we said, in 2019. Tell us about Valerie.
Amazing person, very, very creative, very capable, and extremely empathetic. I mean, it was in her kind of personal life, but it was also her job as an occupational therapist. And she very quickly kind of assessed where people were at and meet them there. You know, even the last couple of days when we saw her at my son's birthday party, you know, when the party was over, he was sad, she was waving goodbye, she stopped the car, got out, gave him a hug. And that was completely, you know, just, she saw the moment, thought that's the right thing to do. And there's the exact same stuff in her work. Creative, you know, murals up everywhere, growing stuff, keeping poultry, you know, interested in books, art, things like that.
Did you have any indication that there was anything going on behind the scenes within her life?
We knew that she was absolutely taking the entire weight of the marriage. Like, she was earning the money, she was minding the kids, she was taking care of the house, she was running the Airbnb, she was doing the garden out the back, she was doing all the running around. And we'd said it to her about, look, you know, you can't be zooming around at this speed all the time. And that was the previous weekend. And she'd said, oh, you know, we'll all be together back home for Father's Day.
You've decided to put your thoughts, your memories into this book for Valerie. Was it, how good, was it therapeutic for you to do that?
It absolutely was. It was very therapeutic, and it kind of grew out of, you know, when you're dropped into this nonsense, you know, you're trying to find out about things you don't know about. I mean, I'm not a legal person, I'm not a social care person, and you write down a heap of stuff. And then you want to write down things about Valerie. Then you're thinking about, you know, trying to analyse where did the relationship go? What did we know? You're integrating lots of new pieces of information all the time. So then you start going, oh, whoa, I've a lot of notes here. This is practically a book.
So in 2019, between the hours of 11 and midnight, as much as the guards can find out, Valerie was murdered by her husband, James Kilroy. What do you know about it, and when did you find out?
So we found out actually the following day, the Friday, and that was about 9 p.m. So first, you know, when the guards apprehended James Kilroy, he was taken to hospital, as would be standard, and it was only then when they said, oh, you'll have to go down to the mental health unit, that he made a confession, that he said, oh, I've killed my family, I've killed my wife and kids. And then they went, oh, whoa, like, where does this guy live? And they went there. They found, thankfully, they found the children alive. They eventually found Valerie's body hidden outside in the van. And from there, they were like, right, we need to find out who's next. Found Mum's address, thankfully, down in West Cork, and then it kind of went from there. The local guards informed Mum, but at this point, you're into the evening of Friday.
What was it like when you heard that news?
Well, we didn't get it all in one go. I mean, first we hear Valerie's gone, and you're going like, how is she gone? That, you know, murder is not, it's the last thing you think of. You know, you immediately think, oh my God, she had a car crash, or you know, maybe she fell and hit her head or something. You're going through everything. You don't think murder. And of course you immediately go, well, where's James Kilroy? And, you know, the guards couldn't say. They just said, well, we have a man in custody. It's like, we can't say. So then you get drip-fed information over a long period of time, and then integrating all that into a book at the end is actually valuable, or even as you go along.
After 5 years and 2 collapsed trials, James Kilroy was found guilty of the murder of your sister, Valerie French, and sentenced to life. That 5 years, what was that like for you as a family? Because the legal process is so tough. You can't say anything. You can't do anything, really, can you? Because, you know, you can't speculate.
You can't speculate. You can't be seen to speculate. You can't talk to people about Valerie, about anything. And you're told, look, don't say anything. So you take it to the nth degree. You say nothing because you don't know who you can talk to, what you can say. Anything could be used. by his defence, rightly so, to try and get him off. So it's like, right, say nothing. And that kind of being silenced for years and years does have an effect. Even now you're thinking like, what exactly can I say? And there's loads of stuff I can say, obviously, but you're still constrained by that. The 5 years was bizarre. I mean, we're dealing with a whole lot of other issues, the childcare stuff, the property stuff. It's not just the criminal legal side. The dates for the trial, you know, they were set, they move, they set, they move. We must have had 6, 7, 8 dates. Loads of tripping up to the Central Criminal Court to see a mention, and then it gets bounced 2 weeks.
And there's there's children, young children.
Exactly.
At the heart of this as well. What happened to them?
So they were taken into care, kind of against our wishes. We weren't adequately consulted on that. Once they were in care, it's impossible to take them out because the only person who is allowed into the court for that situation is their guardian. And that's James Kilroy, regardless of the charge of murder.
So the dad who murdered his wife is still the legal guardian over the 2 children and still has custody and still has rights. And
he's got exactly the same rights as you or I have as fathers. You know, if we were in prison for robbing a car, then we would have exactly the same rights as he has right now. The murder conviction has nothing to do with the rights as a father.
And this is something that has brought, because I remember Valerie's story being all over the news. It was there for a long time, and I can't imagine how hard that was for your family. But you are definitely now embracing this horrific thing that's happened to you to fight for Valeries Law. So can you tell us about this and what it is that you're looking for?
First, to jump back on when you said like the story being out in the media at the start and that being hard for us, it was actually very positive. The media worked really well and was very respectful, and having the story out there is important. You know, the killer wants to go, oh, there's no story, we'll all move on. So having the media jump in and go, there's a thing that happened, a woman was killed, we can't just move on, that was really valuable. About the Valeries Law part, like guardianship law reform is one of 212 recommendations that was in a government report that was kicked off after Jacqueline Connolly's sister Clodagh was murdered back in 2016 by her husband and also the 3 children. So the idea of guardianship law reform is that if someone is convicted of killing their partner with whom they have children, then they would have their guardianship suspended by the courts following the verdict. So a verdict hands in the criminal court, then the suspension would happen in the family law court. This is done in the UK. That law, Jade's law over there, came in May 2024. So it's very doable. It is a constitutional thing by the expert advice. And right now there's 2 potential approaches. There's a Soc Dem private members bill and there's government heads of bill has been published. The next step is going to the Justice Committee where people will talk through the implications because you don't want unintended consequences.
But currently a murderer, and while this was all happening, as your sister Valerie, she didn't have any will. So he was the next of kin for property rights, for guardianship rights. He could have a say over his children. And ye do not currently have, Valerie's children aren't with ye.
Correct.
They're in care.
Correct.
That's got to be hard.
That's hard. The murder was hard. All the other stuff. The murder was hard, obviously. I mean, it killed our mum as well. This other stuff kind of compounds the problem. You know, you get this, you get your mum dying, and then the system is, in a lot of ways, make it worse. Not necessarily intentionally, but by unintended consequences of existing laws, that you're kind of going uphill against a system that sort of denies that women ever get killed by their partners. You know, it doesn't cater for this situation. So there's no status on on the victim's family. All the status stays with the killer, regardless.
Do you get to see, I mean, cousins, uncles, grandparents? Do the 3 boys get to see?
So we were allowed to see them one day in 2024. That's
1 day in the whole year.
1 day in the whole year, which is, I mean, that's indefensible. That's been opened up now. The trial in 2024 obviously made a problem. There's a lot of other days in the year that could have been done, but we're not, we're not focusing specifically on that. We obviously want to have as much contact with our nephews as possible and our first cousins and so on. But that's That's part of the aftermath problem.
A whole system, as you said, that has kind of been ignored for decades, during our state. It's something that is just ignored. These women, they're dead, whatever, it's done.
Yeah.
The husband still has the rights. For you, having this awful, horrible perspective on femicide, on this, like we had Jacqueline Connolly, Clodagh's sister here, just last week, who was murdered by her husband, and her 3 children are gone. What is your perspective on this form of violence in our society?
It's one of those things, you see it and suddenly you can't unsee it, and you're seeing it on the news every month or every 2 months. There's another one comes up, and they all follow the same trajectory. The women are all different. There's no victim type. It could be a very young woman like Jennifer Poole. It could be a woman of childbearing age. It could be a much older woman. But there's a perpetrator type, a narcissistic, entitled, controlling individual. They're all the same, but the women are a very wide range. Women's Aid and other organisations have obviously done a lot of stuff on that. There's absolutely piles of research. There's books, there's careers, there's legal journals. There's a whole heap of stuff known about this. It's not some unfathomable mystery. Yeah. A lot of people would kind of look at something like what James Kilroy did and kind of, we couldn't possibly understand it. It's like, it is understood. And there are a lot of recommendations for making this better and fixing some of the aftermath and kind of accepting, look, if this happens, we need to get better at dealing with what happens afterwards.
Men talking to men about it, maybe?
Very much. This is not it gets categorised as a woman's problem. Oh, it's gender-based violence, that's a woman's problem. The problem is violent men. Mm-hmm. The problem is, as Sarah Benson puts it, it's the problem of men's violence against women and girls. And it's kind of a leadership issue for men. It's not like sensitivity training or something like that. This is about calling out men who have a backwards patriarchal attitude, who feel entitled to loads of care in the home, like James Kilroy having his socks packed by his wife or his saucepan put when he's going camping, or, being minded to a stupid degree and not stepping up and carrying their share of the weight.
And an archaic system that is still, back in the dark ages for a lot of this as well. This is your new book for Valerie, the story of my sister's death at the hands of her husband and its devastating aftermath. David, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. We really do appreciate it, and we are aware that violence also happens from women to men. We are aware of that, but David spoke to the statistics, and the overwhelming statistics. That's what they are. Thank you so much. And if you've been affected by this interview, please visit virginmediatelevision.ie/helplines for support.
There you have it. It's coming up.